So it's another one of our introductory lessons about the war between Rome and the Carthaginians, the Punic Wars, the Hannibalic Wars, you want to call them. And this is a lesson on the Carthaginian military. To learn about the war machine of ancient Carthage. War machine, their methods of making war. To understand its strengths and weaknesses, and develop some analytical skills. Keywords are nobility, posh people, rich people, born rich. Commanders, professional, it's your job full time. Crucifier, punishment. Libby Phoenician, an emperor ethnic group in North Africa. Infantry cavalry. Celt-Iberian, an ethnic group. Shock, a way of fighting, a sort of battle tactic. Shock, you actually meet the enemy head on and you hit them. It's called shock warfare. Numidian, an ethnic group. Balearic or Balearic, Ibiza. Celt Gaul, an ethnic group, and Queen is the warship. So, Carthage, for most of its history, was famous for its sea power. Here's Carthage, it had an empire, North Africa, Spain, at different times, different islands in the Mediterranean as well, depends on what time period you're looking at. But they needed control of the sea to control the trade. So Carthage had always had a very strong navy. In the previous lesson, we saw the famous circular harbour in Carthage, which housed their fleet of quinqueremes. Still 3 banks of oars like the trireme, but more than 3 oarsmen. We think the quinquereme meant 5 oarsmen. So, I've said to you before, we're not entirely certain about this. And with this fleet, Carthage, for hundreds of years, controlled the Western Mediterranean. And the fleet was made up of Carthaginians, Carthaginian commanders, and we think possibly poor Carthaginians were the oarsmen and the marines on deck. Land forces. If you remember last lesson, we said that for a long time, Carthage was like every other city-state, and they had their own citizens in the army. After several disasters, where they got wiped out, they decided to stop doing that and instead use their vast wealth to hire troops. But they still had Carthaginian generals, commanders, members of the nobility with the officers, like Hannibal and his brothers. They're Carthaginians, they command mercenary armies. And interestingly, the Carthaginians were pretty hardcore about judging these members of the nobility. So these are rich and powerful people from rich and powerful families, but if they failed in their military endeavours, the price was death, usually by crucifixion in public. So it's pretty brutal society. Now these land forces, especially, I'm going to be talking here about Hannibal's army that he took into Italy with him, is made up of many parts. There's African infantry. Skirmishers is light infantry, lightly armed, maybe a shield, some spears and a helmet. Lightly armed, they're fast, they go ahead of everybody else, skirmishers. And then there was the African heavy infantry. Pictures of them here. A classic Thracian style helmet, a large shield, body armor, sword, spear. Sword here is a famous falcata sword. The Carthaginians used, they got from Spain. And they'd be, the African infantry were not strictly speaking Carthaginians, they're Libyans from near about Carthage. They're known as Libby Phoenicians. And they were probably the most professional parts of Hannibal's infantry. Hannibal recruited a lot of troops from Spain of varying types. Lots of infantry. Some heavy, scutari, large shield, armor, spear. Some lighter, the catrati, helmet, not much armor, small shield, sword, swordsman. They also use a all-iron javelin called a soliferum. More pictures of them here. So lots of Spanish infantry equipped with the famous falcata sword, a very dangerous chopping and stabbing sword. The Romans later developed into what they call the gladius. But just more importantly, from Spain, Hannibal recruited cavalry. Lots of Spanish cavalry. Armoured, small shield, long spear, a bit like we'd recognise as medieval knights, would shock cavalry. They would charge into the enemy and engage them at close range. They had these very strong, sturdy Spanish horses, and with them, this sort of troop is what made the difference, many people think, in Hannibal's army, these Spanish cavalry. With him, he also had Numidian cavalry, light cavalry. These guys were born virtually in the saddle. No saddle, no blanket, no bridle. They controlled their horses with their heels and voice commands. No armor, no helmet, just a small shield and a bundle of javelins. They would charge at the enemy, but not go close, throw spears, and then run away, and no one could catch them. And in that way, they harried you. You couldn't catch them, you couldn't get up with them. From the Balearic or Balearic Islands, like Ibiza, Hannibal hired, and Carthaginian army generally, hired slingers. Lots of them. He's also a Spanish Catrati with them, Falcata and a small shield. And here's the slingers. Short sling for close range. They would sometimes shoot these lead bolts, these lead bullets. Longer sling here, which is for longer range, full of stones. Stones were always a better idea than the lead, because stones, the ammunition was on the ground at your feet, and they were incredibly accurate. Real David and Goliath stuff. Or they could be used en masse to throw stones, maybe a couple of 100 meters. They were used as skirmishers by Hannibal. Celts or Gauls, it means the same thing. Wild infantry. You often hear Romans, they'd be naked or semi-naked, charging into battle, large shields, long slashing swords. Their tactic was the big mad charge, and nothing much else. Or cavalry. Again, these are the posh people, the tribal leaders in the cavalry. Again, you've got the shield, you've got the long slashing sword. And again, their tactic was the big mad charge. Finally, war elephants. Hannibal's famous for bringing elephants to Italy. We're not entirely certain. Did he have elephants with just a driver on the back, the mahout? Did they have the little more blokes on the back, little cats on the back, the howdah, with more guys in front, chucking spears, whatever? We're not quite certain which it was. But either way, the elephant's job was to charge into the enemy infantry, disrupt it, trample people. We'll talk in more detail in class about just how effective this was. The answer is really not very.